And let me smoothly transition to our next guest here. We have Carola on stage. Carola is from Estonia. She works at a company you don't know the name of, but you know the output of, because their work is very famous here in Poland. They're building all of the cool government apps for Estonia that you've definitely heard of. And she's here to talk to you about things that she knows from her experience at Nortal, which is that company, right? The R was not great.
No, it's correct.
Okay.
All good.
All right, so give it up for Carola. I'm not going to take any more of your time.
Right. Thank you for the introduction. And hi, guys. I am Carola from Nortal. It is true. We have built around 40, maybe even a little bit more, 40% or a little bit more of Estonian e-government. So part of what I will be talking about today will be relevant to it. But basically, I had this situation about a year ago where I had 5 simultaneous front-end projects on my table. And what more, I found myself being the only one responsible from it, for all of them. So government projects and not 5 projects. And then one day I had this situation at hand where, well, some of them were older and some of them were a bit newer. So I had this situation where basically one of them needed a complete design system remake into 2 weeks, I think it was. 2 of them just needed a lot of accessibility testing, and also one of them had a live. So I got to thinking, okay, I have a lot of projects. Am I happy with the quality? Somewhat, but how can I be sure? So I logged in, I got to work hard, and I started getting annoyed at one of my projects. It was like an older one. It had inconsistent use of variables. I didn't want to push this messy thing into any type of production. So despite different stacks, demands and maybe project structures, I did start to think like, how can I not repeat my quality checks? Like, how could I breathe a little bit easier? How could I not feel like this image? And of course, the moment maybe was a little bit obvious. I understood I need to scale my workflow somehow. So before I actually started digging into everything and how I will scale my workflow, there's a great guy on the left. Now, I know Piotr didn't do the show of hand things, but I will. I am so sorry. Can I get a show of hands who recognize this face? Hey, beautiful. And can I get a show of hands again who recognize the name Martin Fowler? I have absolutely no idea if more hands were lifted or not, but you're a good crowd. So basically, before leaping into action, well, I knew I wanted to play around with AI, of course, but I was starting to think, like, what is it that I actually want? Well, I felt like what I actually want is to have some sort of a standard of quality that I know that I can trust. It has to be my own somehow, or like made to be my own. But then let's say I have some sort of a standard, how do I verify it? Well, let's say I verify it and it's not that good, then what? So I started to think, okay, I probably need to refactor my code a tiny bit, but maybe only as much as needed so that it can actually support this thing that I'm trying to build, that everything is of good enough quality despite time constraints and whatnot. So why do I have this guy? Why did I ask for your hands? Well, this guy is Martin Fowler, and his 1999 book Refactoring actually popularized the practice of code refactoring. And he has said a few good things. One of them being that basically with code refactoring, we want to apply small behavior-preserving changes. All right, good. I like small things in the beginning. I have a lot of projects. Great. I will note it, try to make small changes. Then Fowler also proceeded with that we make a big change by stringing together like this, a sequence of all of these small changes. And that's a good thing, because if we make those small changes, we string them together, then we try to kind of achieve a state where code doesn't spend a lot of time in a broken state. And we can also stop at any of our small steps. All right, great. One more thought nugget is that from Martin Fowler as well, that I really like, is that I think it's some sort of like a, how do I put it? Something that maybe we as developers sometimes get lost in. And the thought is that while with performance optimization, we really only care about speeding up the program. With code refactoring, we refactor to make our code easier to understand and like nicer to maintain later as well, or like cheaper to modify later. So, okay, refactoring. But what about the panic monster? What about the instant gratification monkey who's like, you know what? No, I have so many projects. I have so many things to do. Why don't I just refactor, like Jesus Christ, refactor now? Like, why don't I just refactor once maybe the fires don't burn as high? So in the light of that, pun intended, there is, I swear, one small last thought nugget to share with you. And it is this classic idea of refactoring as a loan. So if we don't do it, we will have an interest payment. And maybe we can do even a little bit right now. And yeah, try to attempt basically to put little steps together and minimize our interest payment in the future. Now, so how? I understood, okay, 5 projects, manually, step by step, having a lot of tight deadlines, maybe not the best to do that manually. Of course, AI. We know that there's a problem with various LLMs that often they don't understand our maybe team conventions. So it's not the easiest thing to maybe standardize it across 5 different projects. Although it may be technically valid, I some of the guidelines maybe I wanted to have it follow were in my head. So I definitely needed this kind of quality or the standard of quality that I would trust. And so I kind of started thinking about it like that. Okay, I need to write it down myself and I need to focus on a few or a couple areas. So for me, those areas were accessibility, CSS, and performance. And this whole idea of a silver standard is a standard such that's like quality metrics that I can continuously verify that, yes, I am doing that. You know, for example, for accessibility, I want X. Do I have X in each of the projects or don't I? And now you may ask, like, why a silver standard? Why not a gold one? Well, the time constraint kind of comes into play again. So the silver standard for me is something like an MVP check that just must pass. We can build more onto it later, and it's definitely better than no standard, but also let me show you really quickly how what I mean. Oh, also, this was actually a German government project, but basically I prepared an example for you. I very heavily dumbed down and simplified an old project. It came from another table. As you can see, the contrast is atrocious, and it was one of those projects that needed an entire design system remake in 2 weeks. So people were great, code could have been better, but I will basically use this like dummied down app to demo a few before and afters as I show one way to maybe apply a silver standard and refactor. So let's get straight to business. So kind of a crazy stat for me was that 1 in 4 people in Europe actually have a reduced working capacity. So that's like 87 million people have a reduced working capacity. So obviously accessibility is important so that everyone can use our product. Like Piotr said before, who are we building for, kind of. So something, I don't know if I'd say it's cool, but something important came into effect last year on June 28th. It's EAA, European Accessibility Act. I'm sure that a lot of you have already, well, probably had to take some steps to make whatever you're building more accessible. But if not, then let's definitely start today. So, okay, silver standard, want to make small steps, small like stringable together steps. What do I mean? What is important for me in accessibility? Well, for me, I knew that in my projects, I would be happy with the quality of accessibility if we were WCHC level 2.1 compliant. So for example, this means that all of our images have meaningful alt text. Our HTML is actually semantic, including headings, buttons, everything makes sense. How the user basically goes through our system, it makes sense to them, like a screen reader as well. Everything should be focusable, tabbable. That also includes getting straight to main content and bypassing blocks. Of course, pages titled, language properly defined, proper labels, yada yada. If we have custom controls, they should expose ARIA name, value, etc. But the problem was, I had a new project. One of the things I started, well, like the example that I have here, the design system one, the government one, it's a new project. So how do I actually audit all of that? Like, of course, I can manually go like, okay, every image, does it have meaningful alt text? Or you'd obviously think like, no, just use AI. But in my humble opinion, that sometimes requires quite a bit of trust. So I decided to experiment with something that we very often already use, and that is linters. So I started playing around with HTML Validate. It's this offline HTML linter created, I think it was like, early 2016 by this Swedish guy, David Svenningsson. That's David. He actively maintains it. Thank you, David. And basically this HTML Validate allows us to create a JSON where we can extend the accessibility preset and also by default have to extend the standard preset. And HTML Validate comes with 90 built-in rules. We can turn off any that we don't want. For example, like the element name. I turned it off simply because I haven't yet let an LLM know in any way what our naming conventions should be. Very simply, I can then add it to like temporarily, for example, to my package JSON. That's what I did. Run the validator and see what happens as a generated text report appears. There you go. So our report showed like 28 problems. There were some missing types, some missing accessible text, and a weird width. So obviously the easiest thing would be to just take this report because it very specifically told us like which files, what's going wrong. I could feed it into like an LLM powered ID and then ask for solutions for exact issues. Great. So for example, on the bottom here, I have an example fix that it did. You can see it added a type, it added an ARIA label, and it added an alternative, like alt. Oh, why did I say alternative? Okay, but what I want to point out is like, is it stack aware? So for example, in my case, in this project, I was using Angular material. And well, someone would know that basically the mat button directive actually declares and binds type button itself. So although it kind of did a good thing, it also kind of did it like too much. We don't need it. So hence this middle part that I will very briefly touch upon is that if you've used LLMs, and you probably all have, you have some sort of a rules file, like be it an MD or a YAML or whatever floats your boat. Basically, we can state like, hey, either look into my package JSON for the packages that I'm using, look under all that under the hood goodness, or we can actually state, I'm using Angular material, be aware that if you're adding something, maybe it's not even necessary. Anyways, good info, but we can do much better. With that being said, CSS. I've seen a lot of projects. A lot of them have been very annoying because the CSS has just been like a specificity mess. It's been like just a whole mess, like nested chaos, magic numbers, you name it. We know that good CSS can actually, let's say well-written CSS, can minimize our file sizes, give us better performance, and of course it all ties into accessibility. So CSS was very important for me too. And for the CSS Silver Standard goal, I wanted to keep in mind we want to be behavior preserving. So I don't want to create the whole new design system doing that. But what I do want to do is make my slides perhaps a little bit more maintainable, performance friendly, and just easy to reason about if I were to pass on this project to someone else in the future. So for me, my base rules was I don't want any random hexes, any random, like just random stuff. If possible, I want everything in variables. Of course, what makes sense. And what I also don't want is yeah, like a lot of pixels. I want my units to be responsive, rems, ideally. No inline styles, of course. I don't know if anyone still does it, but it was just too easy of a fish not to catch. And I also want to avoid specificity wars and no dead and no duplicated code. There are some bonus ideas I can share later, what you can maybe also actually add into your Silver standard. But this was the very first like try. So, of course, we can try again, try better, using linters again. Maybe. Oh, nope. Hey, there you go. Okay, stylint. Mighty, super powerful, modern, created by yet another David, a David Clark this time. So I was wondering if I should ask if there's any other David in this who has maybe created some NPM packages, but we will get to it later. Anyways, stylint, we can basically ask it to check the health of our CSS. For my last projects, I think actually for a couple years, I've mainly used Sass, so I can actually have stylint also extend this official drop-in config from the stylint team, which is stylint config standard Sass. And well, basically stylint overall, it comes with over 100 different checks, quality checks, and this stylint config standard Sass adds another 21 overrides, which are very specific to Sass. So basically, I added my important rules here, what I mentioned before, such as like variables, no duplicate selectors, yeah, you can see responsive units, and then added it to my package JSON again, run it, report. But before, one more word about rules. I started to see, because, well, once again, many different projects, different stacks, different project managers, different everything. So it was becoming a little bit harder to standardize everything. I can't just write everything into rules like all the time, like this is using Angular material, this is using React, like whatever. You know, so I guess what I want to say is that just a small little word about rules files, if possible, write. I would say like maybe consider writing these 3 things down. For me, what I like to write is, or definitely define like a workflow contract. So how I want my LLM to actually structure its work would be like analyze, plan, verify, then actually ask how we're doing. Me, like don't want to execute anything before asking, if execute anything at all. Then execute and then verify again against that very same plan that we made. Then also, if possible, let it know, or like you be explicit about context. Let it know what lives where. For example, like a variables file, I'll show you in the next slide. For example, if we have a spacer variable, maybe I can let it know like, hey, this lives here and use this one exactly from here. Don't overwrite it in a random place. And one thing that's also very important is like an uncertainty policy. So if the LLM, for example, there's some info missing, or there's multiple potential sources of truth, or it's unable to verify itself, or maybe it just has low confidence, this is a whole nother topic, it should always basically ask. Less is more. This is this little image. I'm not sure how much you can actually read about it, but it's basically like one bad line of Claude MD affects every single spec, research, and plan. So be aware what you write in there. Maybe less is more. So I got a report. Ooh, did I? Okay, yeah, you did too. Nice. 39 problems, basically mainly just some disallowed units, 1 duplicate border. Before feeding into LLM, I tried to improve the setup. I let it know like, hey, we have this spacing file here where we already have some sort of a spacer set up. You know, I wanted to be aware of my 4-pixel step. Only if something is not dividable by 4, then like use calculations. And could experiment, but also actually got much better results as I was playing around if I did the following. So this was really me just going off and experimenting. It's basically like I had a report, and then I built like a small extra piece of code that would take that report, parse it, group the issues by ID, because as you noticed, they had some like IDs. It would build unified prompts for each of these groups, actually prioritize them based on my silver standard, and then save them under like a prompts folder. And this was also pretty cool, because then I could just copy that prompt and be very sure that I'm doing something very like narrowly constrained, only something that I actually want to do in very specific files, and then later run my linter again to see if it actually did that. And well, I got a little bit more creative there. I love a spontaneous UI, so I was building those cards to see if I could just copy the prompt from like a random local host. So basically, I guess what I want to say is like, I think the beauty of this thought or this experiment and this way to think or try is like, it's very scalable. You can really have fun, and AI can be our ally. It's not basically, well, it's not perfect yet, but I was really starting to see some sort of standardization across all of my projects. So very, very quick word about performance too. So you probably know that 100 millisecond delay can cause our conversion rates to drop by 7%. But how much have you done about it recently in your front end? If you have, well done, keep it up. If not, speed matters. We as developers have a lot of control over it, and we can really create or reduce this type of value. So as I was starting to think about the performance silver standard, one of the easiest ways to think was maybe I can just align it with Google's web vital principles, so like critical benchmarks. So for example, we can have our largest contentful paint below 2.5 seconds, first input delay below 200 milliseconds, cumulative layout shift below 0.1, use lazy loading, avoid huge JavaScript bundles that could maybe, block our main thread, like oversized images, optimize it. Maybe we can even use some sort of like an automated library for compression, like Spark. Anyways, a lot of thoughts there. But these were the main 5. I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think that if you build for the people, or you build for the browser, then I think whatever you build should also be a good citizen of the browser. So you should ideally have a small footprint, should be kind to the CPU, and respond fast. So very similarly, could just say, we can use Lighthouse, the legend, add it to NPM scripts, run something, narrow that report down, have those hyper-focused fixes, tried that, did that, got that performance a little bit better. But this is so-so. Like, it's a win is a win, but it's not that important or interesting, I would say, to go over that whole process again. What was more interesting was taking another step further. So the pattern so far maybe has been like a tool reports something, I use an LLM to fix it, I'm a little bit more confident in what I'm doing, but I started also experimenting with agentic swarm coding, of course. So maybe I don't have to just have this, like, I have some report, I take a prompt and I put it into a singular chat window. Maybe I can use like multiple agents to do things in parallel if I give them specific directions as to what they should do. So what if we have one agent that reads the Lighthouse report in the example of the performance, then prioritizes based on our silver standard that we set, proposes some minimal diffs, verifies it against the rules, and then us, the human, actually verify and approve it, what it was doing. So this was really cool. Try it out. I liked what it was doing. It was a bit more, it felt a bit more efficient for me. But I also want to maybe offer a few more ideas. What I was also like testing it all out, how I could kind of refactor faster, but also keeping quality, is I was playing around on one of the projects with just automatically using like GitHub Actions and adding something into my pipeline. So maybe I could just run the report and the whole process using LHCI autorun. Or maybe I could also automate some budget reinforcements. And when something goes over budget, I either didn't merge or, for example, automatically added a to-do or a comment somewhere that was suitable for my project's specific needs. Anyways, yeah, I guess what I'm trying to say again is that I think the beauty is that it's very scalable and kind of simple to potentially leverage it in any direction that you want to. Okay, so I think it is possible to do a double check of quality, even though time may not be your biggest friend in some cases. So I think it's nice to refactor smarter. I think it's also possible if you, for example, define your silver standard, whatever is important and manageable, very heavy emphasis on the manageable for you, create that, write that down, and try to verify your current status against that. For me, it was accessibility, CSS, performance that were nice to try out with. And definitely, maybe, of course, we use AI like everybody does, but maybe we can do that with a little bit less blind guesses and a little bit less frustration. At least that's what I would like. And if also possible, maybe include that whole process into your routine. So it's not just something you do once and then forget about it. Maybe it's not that actually hard to include it into your routine. And just an unofficial, like due to legal reasons, unofficial note is try to have fun experimenting with it. She says it's like with a fully serious face, but try to have fun. Okay. So as you leave, I hope your brain found some ways to maybe try out this approach. Try to set your silver standards. Use your tools or your AI allies together. If possible, guardrail it all in your CI pipelines. You can ship fast, and you can also ship quality. And it can be accessible, clean, and performant by default. So I believe in you building better front ends together with AI, and I cannot wait to see all the good stuff that you're building and will continue to build. Thank you.
All right.
Should I take?
Let's take a seat. No need to. Let's take a seat. You're now done. You can take a deep breath. Enjoy your time.
Didn't take a single
we're gonna have a small chat.
Nice.
Yeah. So I really want to ask you about the human in the loop, but first, there's some questions from the humans in the audience.
Spooky.
All right. Yeah, let's see. So the most prominent question that I'm seeing is, what are the benefits of generating reports instead of just giving the agent a set of rules and letting it do it?
I find, for me at least, generating these reports is like deterministic. Could I say that? It doesn't freestyle. I know it or at least I knew it for every project that it would generate the same, the same reports, like use the same metrics. I think that was a little bit nicer. For each project I could see, like specifically, let's say this ID, like this ID error, does it have an error or doesn't it have an error? Instead of AI, which like, depending on model, depending on like, I don't want to say anything, but maybe also depending on the customization of said rules file, may like generate a different output.
And it's also possible that AI was trained on some of reports of this exact content before, so it's going to be more recognizable than random errors in new projects, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So I think that's covered, but the question had a nice follow-up. Do you think skills would be useful in this context? Did you consider defining a skill for your LLM to
definitely
give it more?
Definitely. Yeah, it's very well. I think I usually always almost. Oh, maybe.
Are we?
Speaking too loud the entire time. Were you guys okay?
Okay, we're back.
I don't mind.
We're back. Let's go.
Okay. Let's go.
All right. So
skills. Yeah, for sure. The only thing is, how do you define it? So maybe if you define like some specific skill in your rules file, will you like maybe that skill is not beneficial for another task you're trying to accomplish later. So maybe you have to just be customizing your skills file, like not skills file, but rules file and skills all the time. Not sure. Thought.
We don't have a lot of time left, but I still see that people would like you to elaborate on the agent swarm for performance. What does that mean? Does it mean something continuously running Lighthouse in the background and reacting to it? Or like, let's just elaborate. I'll let you freestyle.
Well, let me think how to freestyle it. Well, if you don't want it to continuously run something in the background, let's not do that.
Okay, but
That's boring. Sorry.
like, what do you mean with the agent swarm approach specifically? Like, what is that you recommend people do for the swarm stuff?
Maybe instead of just doing still a lot of things manually, we can use more agents to do that for us, such as like, taking that report, grouping parts instead of me maybe grouping it or using a specific set of. That's okay. Can you hear without the mic? Yeah.
Oh, well, we have a mic.
So I think it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. I think for me, it was just maybe I can be in the chat window a little bit less myself, if possible.
Okay, yeah, that's a very good general idea.
Yeah.
Being in the chat window with AIs and humans sometimes is tiring.
Yeah, both, absolutely.
All right. So with that, I think we're good on this part. So I think it's a good segue to ask you about the human in the loop still. So you said verify. You said the output should be read by a human. So where exactly does the human go into the process? There's an app with issues.
Mm-hmm.
There's the audience and the release date. When is the human involved if you would maximize AI usage in that?
Well, the first thing that came to mind is that I think, and I'm not trying to question AI's legitimacy here, but I think basically we as humans are maybe good at constraining or putting basically constraints on what we want to do. So I know that, for example, I want to do something, I want to focus on A first, and then I want to focus on B. And as I am focusing on A, I want to make sure that A is actually done, not also B and C and whatever else may come into the story meanwhile. So, I mean, I like the previous talk too, in that sense that I do think that our skills will be like supercharged. I don't think we can just avoid, for example, knowing about accessibility overall, because we need to know what we're still, achieving, and maybe like, as I said, like silver standard, you need to know what you want at least. You need to be able to understand that it's not correct or not doing what you want it to do. So I think the human is, for me at least, it's invaluable still.
Yeah. Let's not outsource thinking. All right. Can I squeeze in one more? Not really. So gonna have to postpone it. So yeah, I'm gonna also suggest that people can meet you downstairs for more Q&A in the afternoon. So let's try and organize that. If you had one of these questions that I'm looking at, or any other questions, you have to remember them for a couple more hours before you can ask them. And thank you for a great presentation.
Thank you for having me. I hope you have a great day.